Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Friday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 15th of August now. As we say every night, it is so very important to stay up to date on your latest weather information for your community and village around Alaska. You can do that a lot of different ways, whether that's on your mobile device. If you go to weather.gov/Anchorage, you can get a mobile-friendly page there that you can take the forecast for any part of Alaska, not just South Central. Go to arh.noaa.gov on your website or go to weather.gov/Alaska. A lot of different addresses to get you to the same place. The Weather Info Line is a favorite of Alaskans, 800-472-0391. And write down the numbers as you dial in. You don't have to listen to those prompts every single time if you do that every night. You can keep that new code that you generate, that you write down, handy and just punch right through it as soon as you hear the talking on the phone. Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube are your friends there, online as well. We've shared some information on Twitter and Facebook today, especially if you're on the North Slope and along the coastal areas there. You're probably going to want to see what we just put up on Facebook about the sea ice edge. If you get there before I do here in the show, you'll have the news with everybody else. Twitter, we got some information there and pictures from New Talk. We'll share that with you here in just a minute. And of course, your daily afternoon map briefings on YouTube around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You get a sneak peek at what we're going to talk about here on Alaska Weather. After the show, you get the entire broadcast on YouTube from our broadcast partners here at alaskapublic.org. You can go to their website or go to YouTube and search AKWX TV. A flood advisory continues from this point onward until Monday morning around 10:15. Kenai Lakes, Kenai River, Tustamina Lake, all seeing higher water levels right now due to recent rains, and that's going to probably stay pretty high through the weekend. So if you've got fishing plans, you're going to be out there around the water, keep an eye on the river levels themselves and be ready to move to higher ground in case those rivers start coming up, especially as more rain moves in this weekend. So once again, a flood advisory for the Kenai River, Seeloff River area, all the way down from the lakes, Kenai, all the way down to the Delta, under a flood advisory at this point. So still more news coming. And it's pouring rain in Newtok. This courtesy of my Facebook friend Bernice John out in Newtok, and you can see the really dark clouds there. It looks, no, if we were in the Midwest, we would have people saying this was some kind of a big wedge. It looks a little bit scary, like it's a thunderstorm or a tornado or something. It's not. It's probably just a scary-looking dark cloud. Nothing worse, but certainly some heavy rain there, and it looks like some more moisture moving up through the Yukon-Kuskokwim coastline as we go through the weekend as another storm moves from west to east there. So thank you, Bernice, and anytime you'd like to share some photos with us, you can do that easily on Facebook, on Twitter, or just send it to me on email. You can tag that with AKWX for Alaska Weather, and that'll get our attention just a little bit faster there. So once again, thank you, Bernice, and hello to everyone out there in Newtok tonight. Here's a look at the satellite picture. On the infrared, you can see the clouds moving across southeastern Alaska here as the frontal boundary works closer and closer to the coastline. That moisture stream is just being stretched out, and look at the slug of moisture moving up through southwestern Alaska. And there's that little bit right there, a little rain shower, heavy rain shower working very close to Newtok earlier this afternoon. South Central seeing its fair share with a wave of low pressure here stretching that frontal boundary across southeastern Alaska up across the North Slope. You can see plenty of rain and thunder firing up just along the Brooks Range slopes and southward toward the Yukon. In fact, a widespread area of lightning and thunder this afternoon. Let's look at with the visible satellite picture, and you can see that there are some holes in the clouds today. Some of that probably working its way northward toward Bethel and the YK country there. Low pressure just south and east of Unalaska will draw up the next slug of moisture into the western Gulf, including Kodiak. And the western sections of the Kenai Peninsula may catch a little bit of a break initially, but the eastern side and western Prince William Sound due for some heavier rainfall. Speaking of heavy rain, Yakutat picked up 4.5 inches of rain today. You thought it was raining hard where you are? Try living in Yakutat today. The folks are growing web feet, it sounds like. 4.5 inches there compared to about a ½ inch in Juneau. Looks like 3 to 4/10 of an inch of rain around Cordova. I'm sorry, that's 1.5 inches in Cordova. That's more like it, right? Yeah, you're growing web feet too, I heard. And about 4/10 of an inch around Bethel. So it's been pretty soggy, especially for the southern half. Northern areas still seeing some rain and thunder through the afternoon and early evening hours, and not to be left out, places like Nome also expected to see some rain as we head into the next 24 hours. Here's a look at today's weather map. Low pressure again just outside of Prince William Sound at 1,002 millibars, a 984 millibar low on the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula. You can barely pick out the triple point here where the occlusion, the warm front, and the cold air all come together. High pressure sitting across the central Gulf, trying to squash down any cloud development, pushing some dry air closer and closer to parts of southeastern Alaska. So you'll be the first to catch a break. But as this races northward tonight, already Kodiak looks like it'll be in some moderate to occasionally heavy rainfall. Some parts of the western Prince William Sound and eastern Kenai Peninsula due for maybe 1 to as much as 3 inches of rainfall over the weekend, maybe even more than that as we head into Sunday and Monday. So this is going to be a pretty healthy surge of subtropic moisture working its way northward. So we're kind of getting into that rainy season pretty quickly here. Rain and thunder possible along the Yukon and northward, and for some spotty areas including Newtok and Bethel, you may easily see more of those rain clouds that Bernice sent us there. As we look into Saturday, the frontal boundary working across southeastern Alaska has finally fallen apart. High pressure's taken its place, and this may be your break in the rainfall, at least for a good part of the Saturday. As you can see, the warmer and wetter air is working its way northward to the northern Gulf Coast. Once again, Yakutat could be under the gun for some really heavy rainfall. Prince William Sound will be dealing with some very strong winds, so if you thought maybe you'll take your small craft out there and pick up on some of the silvers, tomorrow may not be the best day for that. You'll want to see the marine weather forecast here in just a minute, but I'll give you a hint. It includes easterly winds up to 40 miles per hour and gale warnings. So yeah, factor that in. Showers and thunderstorms along the Yukon and some probably northerly flow coming down north of Nunivak Island. The wind shifting here across the Aleutians as well. Areas of fog should be expected, especially in the evening and overnight hours there. And high pressure slowly gaining some ground across the central chain with fog stretching back up through the Bering Strait. Low pressure sitting across the Chukchi Sea coast will bring showers to Barrow. And if you haven't heard the news yet, most of the Arctic coast is sea ice free at this point. Just a small area of rotting ice north of Prudhoe Bay. And that is it, and it's not on the shore. So conditions rapidly improving there if you're waiting for the ice to vanish. Showers across the lower and middle Yukon. Thunderstorms possible across the west coast into Bristol Bay. Low pressure around the Alcan. And here's our main storm now on the chart across the northern Gulf Coast by Sunday. Still banking that frontal boundary right up against the mountains. That is going to wring an excessive amount of rain off right around the Wrangell, St. Elias, and then finally pushing that back into southeastern Alaska. So folks in southeast, Saturday is your break in the weather. Sunday will return to wet and probably some windy weather for you, so use the first part of your weekend wisely if you can. Looks like a lot of the rain around the west coast will start to taper off as we get into Sunday afternoon. Conditions should rapidly improve for many marine areas as well for Sunday. One exception again will be southeastern Alaska. Temperatures now across southeast, temps made it up to about 60 degrees or so, almost there in Juneau. Sitka 62, 70 in Hyder, a little bit of an anomaly today. Lower 60s for southern parts of southeast, including Metlakatla, Klawock, Craig, Ketchikan, and Annette. Prince William Sound saw temps in the mid-50s. Valdez was 54, 58 in Seward, aiming for a pretty soggy weekend. If you track the percentage of the probability of precipitation in your area, you like to play those numbers a little bit, 100% is the number that you get this weekend. 60 in Homer, 60 in Kenai, 61 in Anchorage, 61 for Talkeetna. Glen Allen was in the mid-60s. Fairbanks 61, 66 around Fort Greely, 65 for Eagle today. As you get up the road a little bit more toward Ambler and Bettles, lower 60s there. Anaktuvuk Pass was a milder 66. And the Arctic coast, 30s and 40s with Akasuk at 41, 38 in Barrow, about the same in Kaktoik. Nice to see that temperature back on the map now. And 66 in Kivalina. Around Shishmaref, I should see a temp just shy of 60 this afternoon, 64 around Nome. Grayling 61, McGrath was showing 58 degrees. Southwestern Alaska around Bethel and southward, we saw coastal areas in the upper 50s with more inland readings like Bethel and King Salmon and Dillingham in the lower 60s. Kodiak was 62, 50s and 60s for the Alaska Peninsula, 56 in Unalaska Dutch Harbor, 57 in St. Paul and St. George, both pretty toasty again. It's probably about as warm as it's going to be this year, and low to mid 50s for the west and central chain. Now for overnight lows, look for lower 50s in the chain and the Alaska Peninsula. Coastal areas will be a little milder tonight, lower 50s there, and you'll notice once you get inland, temps could go below 50 degrees all the way up into Fairbanks. 52 in Fort Yukon, 30s for the Arctic coast. Kotzebue Sound temperatures still running a little bit on the mild side, lower 50s for most areas. Mid 50s for southeast and lower 50s for south central, with Glen Ellen at 46, back to 61 tomorrow. The Yukon Valley should see highs in the upper 60s and lower 70s for the middle and upper valley. As you get out toward the YK Delta, look for temperatures in the lower 60s, with Nunavak Island at 57, the Pribilofs in the lower 50s, the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula in the upper 50s to low 60s, Kodiak about 61, lower 60s for south central, cooler though along the coast with highs only in the mid 50s for some, and lower 60s for southeastern Alaska, Nome looking at 61. Flying weather calls for IFR conditions again along the coast. Today have just been battering the coastal areas like Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse all the way out toward Barrow, with some pretty gusty winds at times and poor visibility. That will probably continue tomorrow. Scattered showers and storms along the Brooks Range and southward toward the Yukon Valley, and all the way down from St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait to the Pribilofs. Expect a wide swath of IFR conditions and poor visibility for the central and western chain, and spotty areas of IFR across the northern coast, Prince William Sound, especially western Prince William Sound on the eastern Kenai Peninsula, and probably just west of Cook Inlet. Past conditions, Anaktuvuk should see some improvement during the day, but you may see some thunderstorms in the afternoon. Adigan Pass should see similar conditions, some clearing and improved visibility throughout the day as possible. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will likely be dealing with IFR, especially on the eastern side of the passes. A lot of that, though, may be bleeding through the passes themselves. Rainy Pass, IFR conditions throughout the day. Looks like a pretty soggy day. Windy Pass should see some improvements during the afternoon. Isabel Pass, we expect to see VFR perhaps by day's end. Mentasta Pass at this point looks to be VFR. Tonita Pass should be okay. Portage Pass, obviously IFR with more rain coming in. VFR, it looks like on the western side, but watch for that to change quickly throughout the pass and into Turnagain Arm. And Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to see MVFR conditions before the day is through. Freezing levels show cold air, in fact getting colder now west of the St. Matthew Island waters down to 6,000 feet. Freezing levels in general for most areas above 8,000 feet, including southeast Alaska. The Alaska Peninsula could flirt with a 10,000 foot freezing line. Most of south central and southwestern Alaska, though, is looking at freezing levels below 8,000 feet, so a little bit of cooler air there. Icing potential generally above 8,000 feet for sections of northern southeastern Alaska and northern Gulf Coast, and probably with that cooler air in place, we could see at least some light to isolated moderate, and watch for convective weather to show up on the southern slopes of the Brooks Range and down the west coast as we head into Saturday. The jet stream has a pretty pronounced trough of low pressure by tomorrow across the central and western Bering Sea. That is latching into that stronger southwesterly flow, and what happens when we aim it this way? We grab onto a whole bunch of Pacific moisture and sling that right up into the coast. That's exactly what's feeding this situation. A stronger southerly flow at 9,000 feet than yesterday. 30, 40, even 50 knot winds coming in across the Gulf Coast. Southeast, the winds slow down a little bit over you, down to about 15 knots. North and westerly winds coming over the Bering around 10 to 15 knots, and we still have our persistent easterly wind sweeping across the coastal plain and the Brooks Range from 10 to about 20 knots. At 3,000 feet, you can see the pattern is very similar. Wind speed's a little bit lower across the Brooks Range at 10 knots there as they come in from the south and then make a hard bend to the west. 30-knot wind across Barrow and the Arctic coast. South and westerly winds are a little bit less packed in here, anywhere from 40 to about 50 knots from the south and west. They slow down significantly as you head out toward Haida Gwaii. Low pressure sitting around Cape Newenham and north of Bristol Bay, packing a little more wind across the western side, 15 to 25 knots racing across Cold Bay and Falls Pass, with relatively light winds or breezes across the central and western chain. Turbulence potential then, you'll notice a broad area of turbulence across the northern Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and probably the eastern sections of the Kenai Peninsula. So if you're flying out of Seward tomorrow, I would certainly expect some chop. Along the Cook Inlet, there's an opportunity for some light to isolated moderate there. Most of this is going to be below 4,000 feet. Southeast, don't see any really major headaches developing there as far as turbulence goes, though in the last couple days across a large part of southern Alaska, we have seen quite a few more pilot reports for turbulence and even for icing. So be prepared for that as the weather's changing and low pressure is working its way northward into the Gulf. Across the Arctic coast below 2,000 feet, there's room for some light to isolated moderate chop. A lot of that will be right along the coast and northward. Once you get inland, conditions should improve rapidly. And of course, convective weather is still a part of this. Anytime you see a convective tower, that implies turbulence and icing potential, and poor visibility could develop as a result. So that's a look at your aviation forecast. Stick with us here and we'll take a look at your marine weather and the latest sea ice edge right after Hangar Flying.
Good evening, I'm Harry Keeling. On behalf of the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and Alaska Public Media, welcome to Hangar Flying. I've been hosting this program for almost 7 years, and I've always had a guest on, many guests, in fact about over 200, talking about different phases of aviation. But this evening I decided that I was just going to talk to you directly, because there is a technology and equipment available now that can be a game changer for general aviation in Alaska and in fact in the world. What I'm talking about is the angle of attack indicator, the angle of attack system. Let's start with a little very basic aerodynamics. Angle of attack is the angle between the chord line, a line that runs straight through the wing, and the relative wind. There is what is known as a critical angle of attack, where that wing, when it reaches critical angle of attack, it no longer creates lift and therefore is going to essentially fall out of the sky, or it's going to depart controlled flight. The Navy developed angle of attack instruments probably 50 years ago. They've used them ever since then, and the Air Force picked up the idea not too long after that. If you were going to land on a ship, all you really needed was the angle of attack in the cockpit, showing what the attitude of the aircraft is, and I think they call it the meatball on the carrier deck, with the landing officer making sure you're going to land where he wanted you to on the deck. Angle of attack information is incredibly valuable. Now you might say, well, what about airspeed? Well, you know what? Airspeed can lie to you. Airspeed and its correlation with things like stall speeds the stall speed, for example, is dependent on gross weight, pressure altitude, or density altitude, and the G's you might be pulling, and it changes. Angle of attack is always constant. The critical angle of attack is where the aircraft is going to depart controlled flight. You no longer have lift. Why is that important to you as a general aviation flyer? Because a couple of months ago, the NTSB and the FAA got together and did a remarkable thing, realizing that we all need to make a dent in the fatal and serious injury accidents, FSI. They did something with angle of attack that I'm going to explain in just a second that was, I think, remarkable. Keep in mind, and I've said this before, that 40% of fatalities in general aviation are from loss of control. It could be on landing, it could be on takeoff, it could be the infamous moose stall in Alaska, but it's loss of control. You've also heard me talk about the importance of emergency maneuver training in the Department of the Interior. All of our pilots go through it. That's very valuable. And it shows you how to recover from stalls and spins. But I will tell you there's a better way to do it, and that is to avoid loss of control altogether. Because if you're at 250 feet and you lose control, you depart the airplane, I don't care how good you are, you probably are not going to recover before you hit the ground. So why not avoid it in the first place? The thing that the FAA and the NTSB did was they made installation of AOA systems on GA aircraft, certificated aircraft, a simple logbook entry. You don't need an STC, you don't need anything more, and consequently, the price of these instruments and getting them installed is much, much less than it would have been if the FAA had required that they require an STC as a major piece of equipment. Now, there are some caveats with the use of it, but the bottom line is it's been made available for general aviation. And what I'm going to do is, next time, I want you to tune in to our program, and I'm going to bring you an AOA simulator and show you exactly what it looks like in the cockpit. What I'm holding here is 10-year-old technology. This was an angle of it. I mean, the technology's been there. This was an AOA gauge, but it was analog. And I contend that that's not what you need. And I'm going to show you next time a system that's very pilot-friendly, that will alert you and your passengers when you're even getting close to high angles of attack, not even approaching the critical angle of attack. So ladies and gentlemen, tune in next week and we'll talk about AOA gauges and why I think they're so important for general aviation and why I'd love to see them on every Cub and every aircraft in Alaska. Until next time, fly safe.
Thanks, Harry. We'll see you again on Monday. Today's Sea Ice Edge Analyze shows rotting sea ice just north and east of Prudhoe Bay and offshore of Kaktovik by quite a ways to the west. Other than that, the Arctic coast is ice-free. Let me get out of the way so you can enjoy this. Look at that. There you go. Resupply on, barge traffic is a go, and again, your very latest Sea Ice Edge and even outlooks available at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. That's a big day for the North Slope there, so enjoy that. Here's Southeastern's marine forecast as we step up to Saturday. A southerly flow 10 to 20 knots with 3 to 4 foot seas there. Elsewhere, considerably lighter winds across the inner waterways from central into southern sections there down to Ketchikan and Metlakatla. 2 foot seas expected. The worst of it will be in the morning, probably across the Lynn Canal, in the northern parts of the Lynn Canal, with light southerly winds outside of the Dixon entrance, and then really picking up speed as you head northward toward Yakutat. A southeasterly flow 30 knots with a 7 foot sea. That comes up to 11 feet as we get into Sunday. Winds coming in from the south across coastal areas at 25 knots with 11 to 12 foot seas elsewhere. Across the Lynn Canal, mainly in the southern Lynn Canal, you'll find stronger winds there for Sunday, a 5 foot sea. Otherwise, 25 knots there across Frederick Sound and Stevens Passage region from the south and east, 5 foot seas there, and also across the Clarence Strait up to 5 foot seas there on Sunday. So winds coming up for the end of the weekend. And strong east wind blowing across Prince William Sound for Saturday. Look for seas coming up to 7 to 10 feet. Gales again outside of Prince William Sound as well, and across the western parts of the Gulf, 35 to 40 knot winds with 13 to 14 foot seas. Not the best day on the water to be running after silver, so just be careful out there. If you are going northeasterlies coming down the Cook Inlet, 40 knot winds west of the Barrens, 11 foot seas there, southeasterlies in Shelikof Strait, and southerly flow east of Kodiak Island at 30 knots with a 13 foot sea. Variable wind outside of Seward as we head into Sunday. The winds diminish rapidly east of the Barrens and west. Seas are down to 2 feet there. Most of the Cook Inlet will follow. Easterly winds also rapidly diminish inside of Prince William Sound. Southeasterly still a little bit stronger once you get past Montague Island into the northern Gulf. A 20 knot flow with a 9 foot sea, and westerlies now crossing Kodiak Island from 15 to 20 knots. Across the Alaska Peninsula, low pressure is right about there. You can see that in the wind pattern fairly clearly with that counterclockwise rotation. Southeasterly flow inside of Bristol Bay, 4 foot seas there. Southerlies coming into Castle Cape and east of Chignik at 25 knots with a 12 foot sea. Southwesterlies a little bit further down the coast. Northwesterly winds north of the peninsula with a 6 foot sea on Saturday. That should become more westerly with time as the low pressure works its way into the Gulf again. 20 knot winds for most areas, 4 to 7 foot seas in the Bering, and 7 to 8 foot seas on the Pacific side for Sunday. Across the Aleutians, broad northwesterly flow will be crossing the chain, 15 to 20 knots on the Bering Sea side with 5, 6, even 7 foot seas as you get closer to Unalaska, and 6 to 9 foot seas on the Pacific side with winds south of Nikolsky and Unalaska at 25 knots, as low as 15 knots out around Kiska and Attu. As we get into Sunday, the winds will become light and variable for most areas. Westerlies north of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. As you get into Attu, Kiska, you're looking at 15 knots there with seas around 4 to 5 feet. So Sunday should be a much better day across all of the chain. For the west coast, look for a northerly flow from the north and northwest. North of Nunivak Island to St. Matthew and St. Lawrence Island, 3 foot seas are expected. More of a north and northeasterly flow. South of Makoryuk and into Kuskokwim, the bay there. 7 foot seas are expected, northerlies around the Pribilofs with a 6 foot sea. As we get into Sunday, winds become a little more westerly and wrapping around a ridge of high pressure developing to your south. 15 to 20 knot winds should be the rule with 3 foot seas in most areas north of Nunivak Island to the south, 4 foot seas, including the Pribilof Islands. For the Arctic coast now, and once again, generally sea ice free. Easterly flow from Kaktovik to Barrow at 30 to 35 knots. 10 foot seas there north of Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik. Easterly flow out of Wainwright. Northeasterly winds rounding Cape Lisburne and Point Hope about 15 knots with a 3 to 5 foot sea there by Sunday. The winds reverse course outside of Kotzebue Sound. A southerly flow at 20 knots. We keep our easterly flow in the Beaufort at 25 knots, and winds diminish west of Wainwright to Cape Lisburne and Point Hope with weak low pressure setting up just on the inland side and north of the western Brooks Range. Let's look at your marine forecast. Let's recap tonight's weather and take you into the weekend once again. Low pressure, fairly strong system here working its way along the Alaska Peninsula will draw up a healthy amount of Pacific moisture and slam northern parts of the Gulf Coast once again with some periods of heavy rain. 1 to 3 inches of rain just for Saturday alone for the eastern part of the Kenai Peninsula and western Prince William Sound. A dying front for southeast means rain is still in your forecast tonight, and showers and thunderstorms will continue along the Yukon Valley and westward. As we get back into tomorrow, another round of rain and thunder for the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, more likely to see some light rainfall on the north side. Showers and thunderstorms for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Some periods of heavier rainfall west of the Alaska Range will keep visibility down for the range itself. Look for heavy rain to continue across the North Gulf Coast. A better day for rainfall in southeast. That means a drier day for you, but it's back on Sunday as low pressure works its way eastward. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.